conditions are likely to stick around, certainly across the north. Further south, we might just about get above freezing, but it is going to be a cold couple of days, staying cold and staying frosty through the weekend as well. Keep up to date with those weather warnings on the Met Office website. Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewbs and this is Dewbs & Co, the show where we'll get into some of the things that have got you talking today. Now get this, Tory donations have slumped 40% to be precise over the last quarter. Why? What's going on? Labour's, meanwhile, have risen and have overtaken that of the Tories for the first time in a little while. What do you reckon? Is this the beginning of the end? We always say, don't we, follow the money? Or is it a bit of a storm in a teacup and all will be back to normal soon? I want your thoughts on that. And get this, about 250,000 young people say they have no intention of getting a job. Why? My first thought was, what a load of burn-idle scroungers, quite frankly. But then I stopped and I started looking at some of the stats around this, just how few young people are actually confident in things like even writing a CV in the first place. So who is to blame for this? Is society letting these kids down? Or is it the kids themselves? And if you do refuse to work, should you ever be able to get any form of government support financially? Yes, on earth? Tell me your thoughts. And foreign aid, apparently, according to the Development Minister, every penny we spend is indeed in the national interest. I personally would query that, I can tell you, but he focuses in on as well on China and India. He says it's difficult, basically, to justify why we're sending money to those countries. I would suggest that's probably because we shouldn't be. Why are we sending money, for example, to the world's second biggest economy? I don't know. Do you? Give me your thoughts on that. And the Albanian ambassador to the UK has been questioned by MPs here about what's going on here when it comes to the number of young men crossing the channel. He blames things like social media for duping them into thinking that this is the land of milk and honey. But whose fault really is it? I want your thoughts on all of that tonight. But first, let's get ourselves up to speed with tonight's latest headlines.
Thank you, Michelle. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. Travellers are being warned to expect cancellations and delays around Christmas as strikes at a number of airports are set to cause major disruption. The Public and Commercial Services Union says around 1,000 Border Force workers will walk out over the festive period. The union announced its members working at Gatwick, Heathrow, Manchester, Birmingham and Cardiff airports will strike for 8 days from December the 23rd until New Year's Eve in a row over paid jobs and conditions. PCS General Secretary Mark Sawatka says this is just the beginning.
As I said at the beginning, as I'll finish with, however, the action that we've called at the moment will have severe effects on people using our roads, needing driving tests, accessing rural payments, or indeed entering the country over that Christmas period. But this is the first round of action that is designed to be escalated.
The Unite Union has criticised the Prime Minister after he promised new tough laws to limit the impact of strike action. Amid a wave of strikes across a number of public sectors, Rishi Sunak vowed to take action to protect the British public from being impacted. Ambulance staff will strike in a dispute over pay and conditions. Nurses, teachers and rail workers are also due to take action in the coming weeks. Speaking at Prime Minister's questions, the Labour leader accused Mr Sunak of not doing enough to resolve the industrial action.
This morning, his Transport Secretary said that his flagship legislation on strikes, this is what he said this morning, his Transport Secretary, you might want to listen to this, is clearly not going to help with the industrial action we're facing. He should stop grandstanding, stop sitting on his hands, get round the table and resolve these issues.
The government has been reasonable. It's accepted the recommendations of an independent pay body, giving pay rises in many cases higher than the private sector. But if the union leaders to continue to be unreasonable, then it is my duty to take action to protect the lives and livelihoods of the British public. And that's why, Mr Speaker, since I became Prime Minister, I have been working for new, tough laws to protect people from this disruption.
Meanwhile, a planned strike of over 2,000 bus drivers in London has been called off. Unite Union say its members who were employed by Metroline have accepted an 11% pay rise offer. The union says it's a significant improvement on the 4% drivers were originally offered. Former Health Secretary Matt Hancock has announced he will not stand again at the next general election. In a letter to the Prime Minister, he said he was proud of his 9 years in government, making reference to the UK having the first COVID vaccine in the world.
It's been a huge privilege to serve in Parliament and to serve the people of West Suffolk, and I'm incredibly grateful to everybody who's supported me both in Suffolk and in government since then. I've increasingly come to the view that it's so important to engage with people about politics, about how our country is run, not just through Parliament, but also through new and innovative ways. And I look forward to doing more of that.
The Prime Minister said he was shocked to read allegations that a Conservative peer benefited from a PPE contract during the COVID pandemic. Rishi Sunak said it was absolutely right that Baroness Mone took a leave of absence from the House of Lords after claims her and her family received more than £29 million originating from the profits of the PPE firm. She's denied the reports and says she'll fight to clear her name. A man has been arrested in Plymouth on suspicion of using his own boat to smuggle at least 10 migrants from Normandy to a beach in Devon. It follows an incident on June 15th after a speedboat was seen dropping a group of suspected migrants on a beach near Dartmouth. The suspect has been taken into custody for questioning by the National Crime Agency. A man has been charged with a public order offence after an egg was allegedly thrown in the direction of King Charles in Luton yesterday. Bedfordshire police say the 28-year-old man, who they refused to name, has been bailed to appear at Luton Magistrates Court on the 9th of January. It comes weeks after a 23-year-old was arrested for throwing an egg at the King and Queen consort in York. And Time magazine has named President Volodymyr Zelensky and the spirit of the Ukrainian nation Person of the Year. The American news magazine says Zelensky has inspired Ukrainians and gained global recognition for his resistance against Russia's invasion. It says the former comedian showed his courage when he refused to leave Kyiv at the outbreak of the war. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Now it's back to Dewbs & Co.
Thanks for that, Tatiana. Well, I'm with you right through till 7 o'clock this evening. Keeping me company alongside me, we've got the author, James Bloodworth, and the deputy editor of Conservative Home, Henry Hill. Good evening to both of you.
Good evening.
You know the drill, don't you, on Dewbs & Co as well? It's not just about us three here, it's about you at home as well. I want your thoughts on the topics tonight. Why do you think that donations to the Tory party are in decline? I say that with a smile because I suspect many of you will have very strong opinions on why that is. Labour, by the way, their donations are on the rise. I want to talk about that. Also, young people. 250,000 of them say they've got no intention of working. Why? Do you think that's OK, by the way? Maybe if your parents just want to, I don't know, they want to fund you, why you'd want to fund your lazy kid is beyond me. But if they did, is that all right? I don't know, you tell me. And who is to blame for all of these Albanians crossing the channel? The latest suggestion now is it's social media companies duping people and making them believe that it's the land of milk and honey when they get here. What's your thoughts on that? GBviews at gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at GBnews. But first up then, let's get straight into the Tory one, shall we? Rob says, my partner and I cancelled our memberships, Michelle, as soon as Rishi was elected. In their minds, undemocratically, they say, the whole situation was a stitch-up and they left. So they did. I've got to tell you, many people perhaps had the same idea because the Tory coffers, they're slumped by 40% what they received between July and September. Labour, on the other hand, increased what they received. And Tories, in a bid to kind of get some cash coming in, they've decided that they're going to increase their membership fees by, get this, a whopping 56%. What do they think? That people are made of money? What do you make of all this? What do you reckon's behind this loss of cash?
So there will obviously be several factors that are contributing to this. It now looks increasingly as if the Conservatives are not going to form the next government, and there is always a cadre of donors for whom that is the primary consideration, and they're understandably switching to Labour. The other factor, which I think it will be interesting to see the next quarter's figures, because as the Conservative Party said, this is a slightly anomalous quarter in that we had the leadership contest, and Conservative donors have ploughed hundreds of thousands of pounds into supporting candidates in that contest. And that is not all money that would previously have gone to the party, and probably not enough to make up the £1.7 million difference with Labour. But some of that money will have gone into the figures. So it will be interesting to see if this is a long-term trend. But ultimately, many donors, what they want is they want to donate to the party that's going to form the next government. And after the shambles of the last few months, that increasingly looks like Labour.
Does that hurt you to say that?
I mean, I suppose a little bit, but I mean, it's not the fact of it that's upsetting. It's the fact that all of the things that have led up to it. You know, ultimately, I think anyone who wants an effective Conservative government that actually delivers for the British people, the last few months have been fairly disgraceful. And the fact that donors are abandoning the party is not the problem. It's a symptom of the problem. The problem is bad government.
Are you a Tory member, or were you a Tory member? What do you think to what's going on? I mean, I've just read your thing out there, Rob, when you're saying that you left. Are you someone that was always a lifelong Tory, essentially, and you've removed your membership? And how does that actually feel? I've got to confess, never in my life have I ever thought to myself, I know what I need to do, join a political party. It's never been on my radar. I can't imagine it ever being so. But if you are someone that you've been born and bred into politics, it's your thing, it's your passion, you back your party, I wonder how it does feel. But do you agree with Henry's sentiment there that basically the writing's pretty much on the wall for the Tories? It's going to be Labour next time?
Yeah, I mean, I echo some of those sentiments. I think that it's not just donors leaving the Conservative Party. It tends to be people who are moving away from the Conservative Party. And I think the donors, I mean, they don't want to be seen to be backing a losing horse. They don't want to be, especially with their own hard-earned money. I think for the same reason you see some MPs, lots of Tory MPs, saying they won't stand at the next election because they feel like the writing is on the wall already. I think, as has been said already, this may be a blip in terms of the funding figures, because we've had the recent Tory leadership elections when lots of big donations were going straight to the candidates themselves instead of into the party coffers. I also think Keir Starmer is a much more credible leader than Jeremy Corbyn was. I think that's an obvious explanation for why Labour's funding has gone up from donors outside of the trade unions. And there are examples of people who did previously donate to the Tories who are now donating to Keir Starmer, people who would have never have dreamt of donating to Jeremy Corbyn before.
I do find it all a bit odd, though, because it's kind of, I get what you're saying, which is if you're a donor, you just basically want to get yourself in there with whoever's in charge. But then I do kind of think, well, where's your morals, your scruples then? Because surely, well, actually, I was just about to say there's a huge difference between Labour and Tory, but I've stopped myself actually mid-sentence, because many would argue that actually there isn't. And that is one of the problems at the moment, that there's not this vast difference anymore between the two leading parties. Do you think there is?
I mean, it's narrower than it was. I think actually the way I would say it is, if you are a committed Conservative donor, you know, why would you vote to donate to Rishi Sunak's government? Because part of the problem is there's no sort of proactive, positive vision for Conservatism. Rishi Sunak's government at the moment is entirely reactive. It is being buffeted around by the strikes, by the public finances. There's nothing to get excited about. You know, if you had a leader with a project, and you know, Boris Johnson had a project, though he didn't carry it through, you know why you're donating.
What was the project? You mean Brexit?
Well, no, it was levelling up. Well, Brexit was obviously the previous one, but Boris Johnson was elected in 2019 with a positive and proactive vision for what a Conservative government should be doing. And if you're a donor, that's something you can get behind. What's Rishi Sunak apart from not Labour? And as James says, not Labour is not quite the compelling offer that it was.
Yeah, I mean, Rishi Sunak's project is kind of cleaning up the mess left behind by Liz Truss's short-lived administration. So, I mean, there's a 30 billion black hole based on her time in office, and Rishi Sunak has got the unenviable job of clearing that up, and it doesn't really make you that enthusiastic about him as a candidate. And I agree, Boris had a project. There was the Levelling Up project. He steered the country through an incredibly difficult time, and then, of course, there was Brexit. I think there's a huge difference between the candidates.
See, I found this fascinating that because you said, he had a project, and I just immediately I assumed you were referring to Brexit. So when you say that that's the first one that leaps out at you, that was his project, Levelling Up, I wonder if you are watching this, listening to this, you're in the north, perhaps, and you voted for Boris, did you do so for levelling up reasons? Because I suspect for lots of people it was Brexit, and I find that quite intriguing that someone would look at, say, Boris and say, right, I'm going to vote for him in order to level up my town, my city, because ultimately, if you need levelling up, it's because policy hasn't worked for you for quite a big period of time. The Tories have had power for many years. So if the Tories were serious about levelling up, then I would argue that actually you wouldn't have needed to do all this levelling up now, because it would have happened.
But that was one of the most interesting things about Boris Johnson, the early stages of Boris Johnson after 2019, is he managed, despite the fact the Tories had been in office for 2010, to achieve this remarkable, he felt like a new government. And he did offer what looked like a big gear shift in the sort of conservatism that was being offered to the British people. Now, undoubtedly, Brexit was the key driving force behind the Conservative vote in the 2019 election. But it was also the fact that for millions of voters who had never voted Conservative, and in seats that hadn't voted Conservative for 100 years, here was a Tory party that was more comfortable with public spending, that was taking their interests seriously, and was going to work to address some of those economic inequalities. Now, he didn't manage to do it because Boris Johnson is not good at following through on things. But that was still something that if you're a Conservative Party donor, you can think, right, this has worked, it's delivered a historic majority, it could lay the foundations for a really long period of Conservative strength in the north of England, that's worth me giving them a few £100,000. Now, there's no compelling case that I can see for giving money to Rishi Sunak as an ideological Conservative of any stripe.
Yeah, because at the moment, as everyone's pointing out, he's firefighting. He's not able to sit there and be strategic and visionary and positive and set out new grounds for the country going forward because he is getting mullered from every single corner, as we've already pointed out, the strikes, you name it. He's just firefighting, reactive. Maybe, I do wonder, a part of me does wonder, do you reckon he might be able to turn it around because we've got not quite 2 years, but not far off 2 years? Anything can happen. That's a long time in politics.
It is, but I feel like it's got to the point where the Tories got to previously with Black Wednesday, was it? I'm only just old enough to remember that. I think the brand is tainted, if you like, and Labour got to that point after the financial crisis of 2008. It feels like whatever they do, it's kind of tainted now, and it needs a kind of new generation or politicians who aren't tainted by the last few years to take the Tory party forward. I think having been a Labour member in the past when Labour went through this crisis after Tony Blair left, the Tory party feels like it's in a very similar position. Boris was someone who did what Tony Blair did. He could win over voters who would never normally vote Tory. And with him gone, it's a very hard act to follow. And I don't think the Tories realised when they got rid of him just how hard an act it would be to follow.
Yeah, I think you're right on that. And it would be remiss of me not to touch upon Matt Hancock. If you're down with the kids, you got TikTok, you might have seen he did a little TikTok video explaining that, you know, he's basically not going to stand again in the next election. Is that the right decision, do you think, Henry?
I mean, I think it was the right decision for various reasons. It's interesting that his letter cast it as entirely his own decision, and it then emerged that his local constituency association had passed a vote of no confidence in him and sent that to the Chief Whip. So I think the odds of him contesting the next election as a Conservative anyway were remote. But
slim.
Whatever you think of Matt Hancock's decision to go on reality television, I don't think that he was doing the reputation of the Conservative Party or the dignity of Parliament any favours. And so, yes, if he wants to go and do that and make money in crypto or whatever it is he wants to do, that's fine, but he should not be an MP. Yeah,
but then you see, this is the bit that I don't get, because a lot of people were really unhappy about the fact that he was going into the jungle. You know, we can just debate till the cows come home. It's irrelevant, really, because he's done it. But that has to get agreed, surely. So before he goes there, that has to go against the group or the body or the board or whatever it is. Somebody somewhere must have looked at that and gone, yes, you can do it.
The board of what?
I don't know. Maybe I'm giving them a bit too much credit. Surely there's this board of... Look at me. I'm like imagining and hoping that there is like a board of sensibleness, that if I'm an MP and I decide that I want to go jetting off to an Australian jungle and eat kangaroo bits... I had to stop myself then. Surely I would imagine that I've got to sanity check that with someone who rubber stamps it and says, yes, off you go.
No, the crucial thing about MPs in our system is that they are entirely independent. You know, they do join parties and everything else, but actually an MP has an extraordinary amount of leeway. Legally, they're an individual small business with regards to their staff, and the whip is a political arrangement rather than a constitutional one. So no, there is nothing to stop an MP basically doing whatever they like, because ultimately it's important that they're accountable to us, the voters, and not to a HR hierarchy or some board of wise men. But the sense check is us. The fact that he's felt compelled to leave Parliament is, I think, the system working.
Tell me what you think at home. Is it a good thing that he's going or not? Very brief word to you about Hancock.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good thing he's going. I think it's been an embarrassment, frankly, that he's gone on this celebrity programme. I completely disagree with the idea that that's how you connect with the public, as if the public is only, you know, bright enough to engage with watching a politician eating bugs in the jungle. I think, you know, people watch current affairs shows. Quite a lot of people still watch current affairs shows. They're intelligent enough to listen to his arguments justifying what he did during the pandemic.
Well, the people that are into politics and current affairs watch current affairs programmes, and you don't need to reach them because you've already reached them. I guess what he would, if he was here... he might even be watching, shouting at the screen. If he is indeed, what he would say is, you've got those people, they're already a captive audience. He would want to reach the people like me. I didn't vote till I was 30 years of age. I was not remotely interested in politics. Some part of me thinks I probably wouldn't even vote again if there was an election tomorrow. So he probably wants to reach those kind of people. I don't know. You tell me at home, what do you think to some of that? Get in touch. gbviews@gbnews.uk is my email, or you can tweet me at GB News. Going to take a quick break. When I come back, I'll have some of your thoughts And I want to talk about the fact that about 250,000 young people say that they have no intentions of ever getting a job. Why? And by the way, is that okay? You tell me.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. Clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co. with me, Michelle Dewberry, right through till 7 o'clock this evening. Alongside me, I have the author, James Bloodworth, and the Deputy Editor of Conservative Home, Henry Hill. Welcome back, everybody. Anthony says, it's a reoccurring theme with Ms Dewberry that she only ever talks about the North when she is referencing levelling up. Got to be honest, you've rumbled me there. I do kind of bat for my own team. However, you quite rightly point out, what about places like East Anglia, the southwest, he says, we are struggling as well. They blame the Londoners coming along, buying up lots of the property, making it unaffordable for everybody else. Housing, you touch on an important point there, Anthony. That is a whole other topic, isn't it? Many people will be quite happy at the moment because lots of the house prices do seem to be coming down, although lots are very unaffordable for many, aren't they? I'll have lots of your thoughts, by the way, on that whole Tory thing in just a couple of minutes. But for now, get this, about 250,000 young people who are currently not working say that they have no intention of ever getting a job. When I say young people, by the way, I'm talking 18 to 24-year-olds. I'll come to you on this first, James. What do you make to this? Do you think this is all right? Is it just, as it is, or is it a problem?
I wouldn't say it's all right. It's not ideal. I'd say there are several factors probably behind this. I think the pandemic's had an effect. So I think if you look at rates of unemployment generally, the longer you've been unemployed, the harder it is to get back into work because you're spending a lot of time in the house, you're out of those kind of routines, you lose your confidence. I think the pandemic has had that effect on lots of people anyway. So I think you've got people who've been in the house for a long time.
Convenient excuse. Everyone blames the coronavirus for everything.
I don't know about an excuse, but I'm just talking in terms of explanations of why that might have gone up. I think the report said that some young people have lofty and unrealistic career expectations. I think social media plays a part in kind of fueling that.
Definitely.
The idea that you'll be able to kind of live a champagne lifestyle on a Panda Pop wage, or you can be this entrepreneur, you won't have to kind of get down and do a regular job. I don't think that's necessarily bad though. When people say they in this survey that they don't want to work, they seem to imply that they wouldn't want to get a 9 to 5. Maybe some of these people would like to be entrepreneurs. That's not necessarily a negative a negative thing. And most of them are being supported by their mum and dad rather than claiming benefits. So I mean, that's kind of a private,
almost 50% of them.
Private matter. I mean, I'm not encouraged by it, but I don't think it's the end of the world, and I don't want to get too down on young people. I think there are lots of different forces at play in causing this.
There was a couple of, because when I first read the headline, I must confess, Henry, I jumped on the bandwagon. I was like, oh, burn idle, young people, what's the matter with them? And then I started actually reading into the report. It was a City and Guilds report, this was. It was called Youth Misspent. And I started looking into this, and also like a census that was committed, that was done on young people a little while ago as well. And I found some things that really concerned me. More than a fifth of young people apparently don't understand how to successfully apply for a job. Less than half of young people aged 19 plus think that they even know how to write a CV. And get this, 51% of young people aged 19 plus said that mental health challenges were their biggest barriers to accessing work now or in the future. What do you make of some of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the idea, there will be some people who are just like, I don't want to get a job and it would be nice to live on benefits. But I think they're a real sort of cartoon villain. And I don't actually think there are that many people. It's really easy sometimes, if you've been in work for a long time, to dismiss the effect of long-term unemployment. And especially if you're very young, you don't necessarily have a CV, you don't know the applications process, you maybe don't know how to navigate an interview. Jobs are often so oversubscribed that these days it's quite hard to get interview feedback, so you don't know how to improve. As for the lofty aspirations thing, I think another factor of this is that we're sending more young people to university than ever, and they're paying quite extraordinarily high fees. Now that has two effects. It means if they do get a job, they're actually paying a marginal tax rate on a lot of their income, which is higher than many older workers who are on better pays. But it also means that I think they're sold an out-of-date expectation of what a degree actually means, because a generation ago, a degree, relatively few people got them, and it was a fairly reliable pathway to a certain sort of middle-class lifestyle. Now, that middle-class lifestyle has got more expensive, but also there are now so many graduates that many people, I think, have paid tens of thousands of pounds to go through 3 years of higher education, and they've now arrived at the modern British economy, and they're realising that the reason they went, the kind of lifestyle that they were led to expect by their parents, by their teachers, by society, for that investment just isn't there. And yeah, you can understand why they would be frustrated if they've gone to university, they're racked up all this debt, and all of a sudden they're getting the kind of entry-level work which, frankly, you don't need a degree to do, and they could have been doing 3 years ago.
Yeah, and I do blame a bit of the employer side of as well for some of this, because when you actually look, people are saying that they're struggling because many people are asking for prior experience and all of this and that. And one of the things that this report is calling for, it's kind of for employers to be more broad in their selection process. So rather than being so narrow in terms of you've got to have this experience, that qualification, people have skills that are different, that don't necessarily tick a box. But to be 19 years old and not really know how to write a CV, I need to pick my words because I don't want to be too insulting, but you can Google how to write a CV. It's not rocket science. So then I think to myself, well, where is this falling down? Do they mean that they don't know what to put onto a CV? Like, I don't know, I've just left school, I haven't done anything, what can I put on a CV? What is that about? How can you not know how to write a CV?
Well, I suspect it's basic social skills are a big part of this, and education around that. So, I mean, you can Google how to write a CV, but if you don't know how to address an email to somebody, if you don't know how to talk to somebody in an interview, I mean, again, I don't want to sound too insulting, but I sometimes speak to people, younger people, and I sometimes can barely understand what they're saying because they don't have a correct grasp of English, and an employer is probably not going to look too favourably upon that. And I think in school is when I was in school, it wasn't really instilled in us how to conduct ourselves in a job interview.
It should be that.
Careers advice was kind of treated as a bit of a joke course. Maybe it's improved nowadays, but I feel like you're in this professionalised economy. It's assumed that you just get the qualification and then you're out there on your own and things will take care of themselves. But so much of it is kind of softer skills, softer social skills, how to kind of come across well in an interview, and those things are kind of, I don't feel like we really teach those things to young people.
And in some cases it's actually sort of controversial because there are elements of the teaching academia and the teaching profession who the idea of teaching someone how to speak properly which is, what we would consider a baseline for getting an interview in the real economy, they consider that to be an attack on somebody's identity, on their elitist, on their own patterns of speech. And so what you end up with is a school system which in some cases is actually ideologically opposed to doing the kind of basic social moulding that equips someone to function once they leave that environment and they need to compete with jobs against often hundreds of other applicants, some of whom will have those advantages. There's currently a big debate about private schools. Now, you can point to private schools and say, look, their grades aren't actually often all that much better than state schools. But what private schools, I think, are still very good at is inculcating that social skills, giving you that cultural capital, so that if a private school pupil is going for a job at age 19 or at age 21, they do know how to handle that process, and that gives them an advantage.
Yeah, if I was a headmaster and I had students that left my school aged 18 or whatever age it is now, I would think I'd failed, actually, if people in my school didn't understand how to write a CV, how to do a job interview. But I must say, when I left school at 16, couldn't wait to get out of there. I didn't have any real qualifications. And to your point, I had no idea at all how to behave in the world of work. I spent all my teenage years on an estate. My boyfriend was in and out of prison. I wasn't a professional individual, so I didn't know silly things like, swearing in the workplace and stuff like that. It was so basic, the stuff that I didn't know. And I ended up getting what we kind of called a YTS, like a modern apprenticeship, an apprenticeship scheme. And I always say I owe all of my career to that single thing, because a guy there, Harry was called actually, he took me under his wing and they taught me stuff. They taught me like basic things that perhaps you could have learned elsewhere, but I didn't. And they helped shape my attitude a little bit. But you've got to have the right attitude, because I think your point that you raise as well is an interesting one, James, about these influencers. I think so many young people are influenced by daft people on social media, presenting all of these, look at all my luxury goods that I own. And then, by the way, they ask themselves why they get bagelled, because they spend their time boasting about their wealth and then boasting about the fact that they're on holiday and don't seem to be able to put two and two together. But you tell me, where do you stand on all of this? And as James also rightly mentioned, about half of these young people that we've just mentioned being supported by their parents. Why on earth would you, as a parent, if you've got a kid that says, I don't want to work, I don't want to get a job, why would you fund them? Even if you've got entrepreneurial and, aspirations, go get a job and fund yourself. Am I being harsh, or am I just missing something? I don't know. You tell me. GBViews at gbnews.uk is the email. I'm going to take a quick break. When I come back, I want to talk to you about foreign aid. Is every single penny that we spend in the national interest? You tell me.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry. I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. Alongside me, the author James Bloodworth and the deputy editor of Conservative Home, Henry Hill. Lots of you getting in touch about that last topic in terms of young people. Flick says, Michelle, I'm 18 and I've applied for many jobs, entry-level jobs. They're now asking for 1 year experience minimum. Taco Bell, she says, wanted 2 years experience minimum. And so she says it goes on. And you're saying our social skills are fine and social media isn't putting people off work. It's that the jobs are hard to get right now. I've got to say, I do kind of sympathise with you a little bit there because I do think a lot of employers, I single one out there and I shouldn't have done, I'm sure that there's lots of them that are similar. But a lot of employers, they just put things without thinking it through. So they'll put down, you need to have X amount of experience or you'll need a degree in whatever. And I just think it's almost like a filtering method because so many people will apply. They're just trying to filter them. And I think employers have a role to play here. Just be a bit more open-minded with what you're asking for. And you might find some interesting talent out there. You never know. Anyway, Development Minister Andrew Mitchell says it's virtually impossible to defend spending taxpayers' money in China and India. He's talking, of course, about things like foreign aid. But he reckons that every penny of Britain's foreign aid budget is spent, indeed, in the national interest. First and foremost, I'd even question that final statement. I don't think every single penny that we spend is in the national interest. And I certainly don't think we should be sending countries that have got their own space stations and this and that money. Am I missing something, Henry?
So there's always a tension with the international aid budget between distributing it on purely humanitarian grounds and distributing it in a way that aligns with Britain's broader foreign policy objectives. Now, if you look at what the spending on China is, it's not helping, dig wells or anything like that. It's things like funding scholarships through the British Council to allow people to come here and study. And there is an argument to be made that that sort of engagement is very useful because it gives us connections to Chinese people who might want to study in the UK. Whether it should be part of the aid budget, I think, is another question. But the government, ever since it merged DFID with the FCDO, has never really, officially, the line is, of course, that the aid budget is entirely spent purely in pursuit of the national interest and in line with our broader foreign policy objectives. But that will sometimes mean that we end up making something which the Foreign Office probably thinks is a very good diplomatic decision, but which, assessed from a humanitarian perspective as aid, is a bit of a head-scratcher.
Where do you sit on this, James?
I mean, I think the relationship with India is slightly more complex considering our joint history, and I think India is an important country which we do want to see remain in the kind of Western democratic fold. We don't want it to because India's always had a long-standing relationship with the Soviet Union and then Russia. I think we want India to move into the kind of the Western fold in that respect. I don't think Western money should be going to China, though. I think that's. China is beyond the pale. I mean, it's a country. I read the other day that China is seeking to quadruple the number of nuclear weapons it has in the next 10 years. It's put up to 500,000 Uyghurs, minorities in concentration camps. It's not a country that I think a penny of British taxpayers' money should be going to. I appreciate there's a nuance to this, but I think we should be very careful because I think it discredits the entire aid budget, because I think the aid budget does perform some good in the world. And I think when it goes to these despotism, I think it discredits the whole enterprise.
First and foremost, I think it's absolute lunacy that the foreign aid budget is a spend target enshrined in law. And I say this frequently when we discuss this topic, because if you enforce in law that you've got to spend this money, you've got to, then you're just asking for trouble by way of wastage, just flittering your money away, not on effective products, outcomes, services, whatever it is that you're trying to achieve. You say that, yes, we can do good. You mentioned India, by the way, and I'm simplifying things, but India is almost a country of two halves. You have very, very extreme amounts of wealth in India, and then you have incredible levels of poverty. I've done a fair bit of work in India, and it is very distressing. You see children, they'll come up to your cars and they're living on the streets. It's appalling. Why isn't it the responsibility of their own government to help their own citizens more?
I mean, I think it is, and I wouldn't say I agree with ring-fencing certain departmental budgets, because I think it basically depends on what the priorities at the time. So, I mean, I think the priority at the moment would be British citizens living here in poverty, where we have, this huge cost of living crisis, and I think that should determine where some of the money goes at the moment, rather than ring-fencing certain budgets, especially the aid budget.
Yeah, and do you think about this whole enshrinement in law? Do you think that should be a thing?
I don't generally approve of that way of policy making in general. I understand why they did it, because ultimately, especially now when there's huge pressure on government budgets, it can be very easy to cut some things, and they wanted to guarantee a minimum level of provision. But as you say, I think it has got better recently, but a few years ago, it was absolutely scandalous, because what would happen is they'd be coming up to the end of the fiscal year, and they'd have money left in the pot. And so they'd just be shoveling it out the door, and that's how you got that rash of stories about them funding all kinds of inappropriate things, not tracking the impact. Because often, actually, people sometimes don't realise this, aid money spent badly can be hugely disruptive. It can fuel corruption, it can undermine local economics. So you do need to be careful how you spend it. Now, so I don't approve of having a fixed target. I do approve of the amount of money we spend. I think it can do a lot of good, and if spent properly, it can try and solve problems before it reaches. It did get reduced
from 0.7 to 0.5.
Yes.
Do you agree that it should have been reduced?
No, I do think it should have been reduced. I think that there was huge pressure for that, especially when British people are facing enormous difficulty. But it is important to remember that at least a chunk of the aid budget, by solving problems at source and by trying to tackle problems in other countries, it can prevent, for example, or at least slow things like refugee flows, which end up in Britain anyway, and we have to fight them at the channel.
So do you think 0.5 is the right level? So I think it translates to about 11.5, 11.6 billion or something like that per annum. Is that right?
I would have had to go through the spend and see what percentage of it I thought was being spent wisely. So I can't give you an informed judgment. I think that reducing it was the right thing to do in the circumstances, but I'm not well informed enough, I don't think, to give an exact figure.
Do you think 0.5 is there or thereabouts the right figure? Should it have been reduced from 0.7?
I think it's a reasonable figure. I think it depends on the situation. I mean, if at times of greater kind of abundance and affluence, I think the figure should be, we should consider moving the figure up, and at times of austerity, such as now, we should consider reducing it. I think it depends. This is one of the reasons why I don't agree with ring-fencing certain budgets, because, I mean, the priorities change. It depends what the priorities are at the specific time.
Well, I personally think that the priority should always be domestically. I don't, whatever.
Yeah,
I think
would agree.
Your priority as a government is the citizens of your own country.
But I think that I agree with a point that's just been made. I mean, I would consider myself an internationalist, not just for kind of moral reasons, but I think there's a realist case for that. That if we don't deal with some of these problems overseas, they impact us 10 times harder on our own shores. It's not just a case of we can't just isolate ourselves from the world, and democratic development in some kind of developing countries actually benefits us in the long term as well.
Yeah, and I think I understand what you're saying in terms of, yes, if we fix it there, then we're helping ourselves here. But then you have that argument, and then some people will be watching this thinking, well, where do you draw the line with that? Because obviously we see what's going on in Afghanistan now with the Taliban, promising that they were these reformed people actually going back to their previous ways. What do you do then? Do the UK go back into there and get re-involved again? Like, it's a never-ending circle, isn't it?
But that's politics, and that's simply being a government in a changing world. There's always going to be a debate about where you spend the money, how much is the right money to spend. Countries will change, and then you'll have to change your decision. But I don't think that you can say that because people can disagree about where that line is and they can disagree about individual spending decisions, that we therefore shouldn't do anything. Because you can have a similar debate about pretty much any government budget. There's always a debate about how much do you spend on defence, education, healthcare, how do you spend, who gets it, who doesn't. We just did a big debate about who should get welfare. That debate is unavoidable.
But when your country's economy is in the state that we're in, apparently pretty much destitute, everyone having to tighten their belts, whether it's pay more tax, have this issue, that issue, this issue, ultimately there'll be a lot of my viewers, and I can see them writing in now as we're speaking, sitting there saying we shouldn't be giving any foreign budget at all right now.
With say the Taliban that was mentioned, I mean, if we don't want to have permanent troops permanently in Afghanistan, then we have to work with, say, for example, the Pakistani government to keep a lid on the terrorist activities of militants and insurgents and the Taliban government itself, and that costs money. That is what part of the aid budget goes towards educating people so that they don't fall in with these terrorists.
Well, David has said, Michelle, at the start of this, you asked why we're sending money to China. The answer is simple: because we're soft in the head. There you go. Dave's hit the nail. I think for many people might agree with that. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk about the goings-on in the Channel. The Albanian ambassador to the UK is being questioned by MPs today about whose responsibility is all of this. Whose fault is it? Everyone likes to poke blame, don't they? Will you tell me the answer to that? I'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co. with me, Michelle Dewberry, keeping you company until 7 o'clock tonight, alongside with the author James Bloodworth and the Deputy Editor of Conservative Home, Henry Hill. Phil says, talking about the Tories, Michelle, my wife and I have just rejoined the party purely to be able to vote if and when Boris comes back. Cool, blimey. Phil, do you reckon that's going to happen? I don't know. Dave from Wirral says, I voted Tory for almost 40 years. The way that the Tories are dealing with the migrant problem will prove to be the end of the party. Well, you've just teed me up nicely there, Dave, because the Albanian ambassador has admitted that Channel migrants are pretending to be modern slavery victims, you don't say. He's added as well that he feels his fellow nationals are being duped by social media advertisements promising them paradise. It baffles me, by the way, Henry. Why are all of these advertisements, these videos, etc., even allowed on social media sites? They should have an instant ban, and they don't. I mean, haven't anyone try and talk about anything like the vaccine or anything, you'd have been chucked straight off. But yet you can seemingly act as some kind of pseudo-travel agent and get these people across on social media. What do you think is going on?
I suppose they're not being very effectively policed, and maybe Albania needs an online safety bill. But it does highlight the way, the sophisticated way in which many of these smuggling and trafficking networks work, because, you know, they're not kidnapping people off the streets. They put a lot of effort into mis-selling people on their prospects of living in the UK. And then, as you say, they encourage people to do things like dispose of their passports, misuse the Modern Slavery Act, which is a very important piece of legislation that we shouldn't allow to be undermined in this way. So what we really need to do, and if you're asking who the responsibility is, it's the smuggling gangs. And I think the question, all of our efforts really should be, I want to see big, high-profile trials for the people who've been smuggling people, putting them on leaky boats and making a profit.
What responsibility do you think that the person getting onto those boats, knowing full well that it's not legal, what about them?
Well, I mean, fine, we can debate their moral culpability, but as a policy solution, I don't think that's particularly useful. They're simply coming. It's obviously not great if they're trying to come here illegally, and I think that's wrong, but telling them that that's wrong isn't going to do anything. I think that in terms of an actual response, what we need to be doing is not just catching the boats, although that's important, it's smashing the networks that are inducing people to leave Albania and other countries, smuggling them here and putting their lives at risk on the basis of a lie.
James?
I mean, part of the problem is there's a huge backlog of asylum claims. I think something like 90% of claims from the past 2 years haven't been processed yet. And I think the government is culpable for that because it thought it could do this on the cheap, essentially. I think you do need to fund the Home Office probably to process these claims and then send people back, because that sends the strongest message to Albanians thinking of coming across on a boat that their claim is going to be rejected. I think you have to send a message here. Yes, I think the social media companies should crack down on this content, but the British government should be processing these claims much more quickly and sending the people back. And that will send a message, hopefully, to people thinking of making the journey that they're not welcome here as asylum seekers. And I think that brings credit to the whole, makes the whole system more credible for those who are actually genuinely claiming asylum.
But also, though, if I had a bit of a dull life wherever I lived and my mate was in a lovely Victorian 4-star hotel and was ringing me, video calling me, showing these wonderful golf course grounds, I'd probably want to be there as well. So actually...
But if it was being processed, if the claims were being processed much quicker, you wouldn't have lots and lots of people waiting around in hotels.
Or if the government built in a state to actually keep the number of claimants it has on the books.
Well, Lee Anderson, the MP, by the way, I think, have we got a clip of him? I think he's been watching this programme because listen to what he was asking today.
Because they don't have the possibility to apply for legal migration. That's the problem. And to apply for visa. Because
No, let me come back to you. Why can't they just visit the country for 28 quid and then claim asylum?
Why?
Yeah. Why can't they visit the country for £28, travel on a plane for £28, come, i.e. on a holiday, and then claim asylum? Why can't they do that?
I don't have this information.
So you do have this information. Why can't they do that?
I've got to say I do. I think Lee was watching me because I asked that a few months ago. I was pondering, why go to all that hassle, all that expense of getting on this boat when you could just get on a flight? I don't know the answer. I don't know. Do you know the answer at home? Emily says, Michelle, the trouble with some young people is they want their perfect job or an easy life. This is about the 250,000 young people that say they don't want to work. She says, when I left school, you had to take the first job you offered and lump it. My folks won't allow me to sit round doing nothing. Parents are too soft now. You're blaming it on the parents. An anonymous mum, I noticed she didn't give your name, she says, my son is 35, he got a first in his maths degree at university. He's barely worked more than a few hours a week since. He's made it clear he has no intention of working full-time. He's fit and well, and there's no reason why he can't work. Well, I could tell you, good job I'm not his mother. I'd have turfed him straight out, and I would have been making him work from a long time ago. You need to have a word with him, you do. Roberta says, young people don't have much going for them. They can't get a home. They get low pay. You've got to work till you're 80. Why bother? Alison says, Michelle, I want to ask you this. Why would anyone with a brain want to get a job? I can see why they wouldn't. All your taxes, the amount the government takes is rising for the employed. If you're on benefits, though, you get all of your protection against the cost of living protected, she says. Where's the incentives for people even to bother? JT says, pack it in blaming the pandemic for everything. Get out there and get a job. Right, that is all I've got time for. Thank you very much, James Henry, for your company. I'll be back tomorrow. Lord Moylan, Kevin Craig keeping me company. But next up is Lawrence Fox. Good evening, Lawrence. What have you got for us?
Good evening, Dewbs. Tonight we're talking about Rishi Sunak's relationship with the truth, why Albanians are boycotting budget airlines, and Matt Hancock's new career, thank God.
Good evening, I'm Alex Deakin and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office. We have issued a few weather warnings over the next few days, mostly for ice, but also across parts of northern Scotland, some snow as well. Low pressure up to the northeast, the winds coming down from the north. Not particularly strong winds, cold and brisk across northern Scotland and along the east coast. But elsewhere the winds are light, we've got clear skies for most, hence why it's turning so frosty. Now there are some showers across parts of Wales, southwest England and Northern Ireland. Snow on the hills, a mixture of rain and sleet at low levels. Same goes for these showers across the east of England. And where we've got any showers, those temperatures tumbling means it could be icy, -4, -5, even in towns and cities, lower than that in rural spots. So a frosty, potentially icy start to Thursday. More snow showers keep going through the night and tomorrow across northern Scotland. A few more centimetres likely, especially on hills, but even at lower levels. The showers across Wales, southwest England will come and go, and Northern Ireland. Again, a bit of snow likely over the hills. For many, it's a sunny day, but it's going to be a cold day tomorrow, 2 or 3 at best for the majority.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by 2 of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewbs, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dewbs and Co. Me and my panel will get